Hi, I'm Alicia, and I guess I'm the kind of person people don't really see at first glance. I live here in Seattle, navigating the gray skies and the endless rain, just like anyone else. My life, from the outside, probably looks pretty ordinary. Maybe even a little underwhelming to some. Especially my family. For years, I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who drove the beat-up old Toyota Tercel while everyone else was pulling up in German sedans or shiny new SUVs. They never missed a chance to point it out. Not directly, not always with malice, but with that kind of casual, dismissive pity that stings worse than outright meanness. "Oh, Alicia, still got that old thing," they'd say, a little smirk playing on their lips. Or, "Couldn't you treat yourself to something a bit nicer? You work hard enough, don't you?" The implication was always clear. I wasn't successful enough. Not like them. Not like my sister, Sarah, with her perfect house and designer clothes, or my brother, Mark, climbing the corporate ladder and talking endlessly about his stock options. I'd just smile, a tight little thing that didn't reach my eyes, and mumble something about it being reliable or good on gas. What was the point of explaining? They wouldn't have understood anyway. They didn't understand anything about my life, not the parts that mattered. They only saw the surface, the quiet exterior, the practical car, and they filled in the blanks with their own assumptions. Assumptions that made me convenient. They saw someone who had nothing better to do than run their errands, someone who wasn't burdened by the trappings of real success, expensive hobbies, fancy vacations, car payments that signaled status. They saw someone who must have plenty of free time and maybe even a little extra cash lying around, because, clearly, I wasn't spending it on things that showed I was someone. It was a dangerous perception, a perception that allowed them to ask, and ask, and ask, without ever feeling like they were taking. This story isn't just about a car or about money. It's about what happens when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally only value you based on what they think you are, or what they can get from you. It's about the slow, insidious process of being underestimated and exploited, and what it takes to finally say, enough. It's about reclaiming your worth when others have decided you have none. Stay tuned, because sometimes the quietest people are the ones with the biggest stories to tell. And if you've ever felt unseen or taken advantage of by the people closest to you, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You are not alone. My story, the one they never saw, began a long time ago. It wasn't a sudden shift, but a slow, almost imperceptible drift into the role they assigned me. I was the middle child, sandwiched between Sarah, the eldest, who was always the pretty one, the popular one, the one who charmed everyone without effort, and Mark, the youngest, the smart one, the promising one, whose every achievement was lauded as evidence of his future greatness. I was just Alicia. Quiet, compliant, good at school but not brilliant, helpful but not charismatic. I faded into the background of our family's vibrant, often chaotic life. My mother, bless her heart, had a way of seeing what she wanted to see. Sarah was her social triumph, Mark her intellectual pride. I was her helper. The one who could be counted on to do chores without complaining, to babysit younger cousins, to drive my grandmother to appointments. There was no grand announcement of my designation. It was simply the role I slid into, and the more I fulfilled it, the more it became expected. My wants, my needs, my own burgeoning interests were often overshadowed by the demands of facilitating Sarah's social calendar or ensuring Mark had the perfect environment for studying. It wasn't malicious, not exactly. It was just natural to them. And for a long time, it felt natural to me too. It felt like love, like being needed. The pattern solidified as we grew older. Sarah went off to a prestigious university on scholarships she barely seemed to appreciate, relying on mom and dad for lavish allowances. Mark excelled in everything he touched, his path paved with internships and networking opportunities facilitated by family connections. I went to the local state university, worked part-time jobs to pay for books and living expenses, and graduated with quiet efficiency and minimal fanfare. There was no big party for my graduation. Everyone was focused on Mark's upcoming move to start his first real job in another city. I remember driving myself home from the commencement ceremony in the used Tercel I'd bought with my carefully saved earnings, a lump in my throat, feeling utterly alone amidst the celebration of others. The Tercel became an unwitting symbol of my place in the family hierarchy. It was reliable, yes, but it was also old, faded, and utterly devoid of status. When we'd gather for holidays or family events, my car would sit in the driveway next to Sarah's gleaming SUV and Mark's sleek sedan. The comments started subtly, a gentle tease about the mileage, a sympathetic sigh about its age. "Doesn't that thing have a few 100,000 miles on it now, Alicia?" my Uncle Tom would chuckle, elbowing my father. My father would just smile, a familiar awkwardness on his face. He wasn't cruel, but he rarely intervened when his siblings or even his own children made me the butt of their jokes. Soon, the car wasn't just a symbol of my perceived lack of wealth, it became a justification for using me. "Oh, you don't mind running this across town, do you, Alicia?" "It's not like you have far to go in that," Sarah would say, handing me a package she needed delivered, never offering gas money. "Could you pick me up from the airport, Alicia?" "My car is getting detailed, and it's so much trouble to get a taxi," Mark would text, always assuming I was available, always assuming my time was less valuable than his. My time was less valuable in their eyes. Because I didn't have a demanding job in finance like Mark or a packed social calendar like Sarah. I had a quiet job as a data analyst. It was stable, it paid reasonably well, and I was good at it. But it wasn't flashy. It didn't command respect in their world of appearances. So, my weekends were often filled with errands for others, driving my mother to doctor's appointments she could easily have booked a ride for, helping Sarah move boxes she could afford movers for, picking up groceries for whoever happened to call and declare themselves too busy. It wasn't just favors, it was money too, though always framed differently. "Alicia, could you just front me for this until payday?" "Just $20, Mark would ask, paydays seemingly never arriving. "I'm a little short this month for my yoga studio membership. Could you lend me $50? Just for a week," Sarah would plead, the money never materializing again. It wasn't large sums, not usually, but it added up. And it was the principle. They asked, assuming I had no expenses, assuming my modest salary was entirely disposable because I wasn't spending it on status symbols. They never asked each other for these small, nagging loans. Sarah and Mark borrowed from mom and dad for down payments on cars and houses, large sums given freely and repaid whenever, if ever. My small loans were different. They were taken for granted, easily forgotten. The expectation grew, like a weed choking out everything else in the garden of our relationship. I was the default solution to their inconveniences. "Need a last-minute dog sitter? Call Alicia. Need someone to wait at your house for the repairman? Alicia has nothing else going on. Need someone to drive 3 hours to pick up that antique table you just bought? Alicia has that old, reliable car." They thank me, sometimes, with a quick hug or a casual, "You're a lifesaver." But there was no real recognition of the cost to me, the miles on my car, the gas money I spent, the weekends I sacrificed, the sheer mental load of constantly being on call. The worst part wasn't the tasks themselves, but the way they talked about me while they were exploiting my labor. I'd overhear conversations where they'd joke about my predictable routine, my lack of ambition, how I was content with so little. They mistook my quiet pragmatism for a lack of aspiration. They saw my old car and my sensible life as proof that I wasn't striving for anything more, that I was happy being the reliable, invisible backdrop to their glittering lives. What they didn't see was where my money was going. While Sarah was spending hers on boutique clothes and expensive brunches, and Mark was pouring his into his carefully curated image of corporate success, I was living frugally, saving every penny I could. My job might not have been glamorous, but I was good at it, I was reliable, and I got steady raises. I ate leftovers, I bought clothes from consignment shops, I took my lunch to work. I didn't take fancy vacations or upgrade my phone every year. I had a goal, a quiet, fiercely private goal that fueled every sacrifice. It started with reading. Hours spent in the local library, poring over books about personal finance, investing, real estate. I was fascinated by the idea of assets, of making money work for you instead of just working for money. I devoured podcasts, followed blogs, learned the jargon. And I saved. Relentlessly. Every dollar from my paycheck that wasn't strictly necessary for rent, utilities, and basic needs went into a high-yield savings account. It was slow, painstakingly slow at first. There were times I wanted to give up, to buy that new dress Sarah raved about, to join my colleagues for expensive drinks after work. But I held firm. The dream, the quiet determination, kept me grounded. My first investment was terrifying. A small duplex in a slightly rougher neighborhood that was, according to my research, on the cusp of revitalization. I used every cent of my savings for the down payment, qualified for a modest mortgage, and suddenly, I was a landlord. The family knew I'd bought something, a fixer-upper, I'd vaguely described. They probably pictured a tiny, dilapidated house I was pouring money into. Mark made a dismissive comment about the neighborhood. Sarah wrinkled her nose. They offered no help, no congratulations, just a quiet, patronizing amusement. What they didn't know was that I was pouring my weekends, not just money, into that duplex. I learned to patch drywall from YouTube videos. I spent hours stripping old wallpaper, painting, cleaning. I found reliable, affordable contractors for the bigger jobs I couldn't do myself. And I learned to manage tenants. It was hard work, harder than my day job, but it was mine. And it was paying off. The rents covered the mortgage and expenses, with a little left over. I reinvested every spare cent. Within 3 years, I had saved enough, combined with the equity and cash flow from the duplex, to buy my second property, a slightly larger building with 4 units, closer to downtown but still overlooked by most mainstream investors. This time, I was more confident, more strategic. I negotiated harder, managed the renovations more efficiently. This building generated significantly more income. I kept my life deliberately simple. I still drove the Tercel. I still wore plain clothes. I still lived in my modest apartment. There was no outward sign of my growing success. It felt safer that way. Safer from the questions, safer from the potential demands. It was my secret armor, built dollar by dollar, property by property. While my family was busy performing their success for the world, I was quietly, relentlessly, building something real. All the while, their expectations of me continued. The requests for favors and money didn't stop, they escalated. My mother started hinting that I should contribute more to a fund for my grandmother's care, even though I was already visiting her regularly and helping with her errands, things Sarah and Mark rarely did. "You have such a simple life, Alicia," she'd say. "Surely you can spare a little more." Sarah and Mark have so many expenses with their houses and families. Sarah needed help planning her child's elaborate birthday party because her social commitments were too overwhelming. Mark needed me to research and organize his next big business trip because his time was too valuable. The breaking point wasn't a single dramatic event, but a slow accumulation of slights and impositions that finally cracked through my long-held resolve. It was a Tuesday evening, late. I was exhausted. I'd spent the weekend dealing with a plumbing issue at one of the buildings, then driven my mother to a specialist appointment hours away, and come home to a sink full of dishes my roommate had left. I was finally sitting down to relax when my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Alicia, oh my God. Thank goodness you answered," she said, her voice breathless and dramatic, as always. "Listen, something just came up. My friend canceled last minute, and I absolutely have to be at this gala tonight. It's a huge networking opportunity for her husband's name, S Business. But the babysitter I booked is refusing to come because she has a sniffle. Can you please come watch the kids? It's just for a few hours. Like, right now." I felt a familiar wave of nausea and resentment. It was a 2-hour round trip to her house minimum. I was physically and emotionally drained. "Sarah, I'm really tired tonight," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "I had a rough weekend and I was hoping to just stay home." Her tone shifted instantly, from flustered friend to disappointed parent. "Oh, Alicia, don't be difficult. It's just a couple of hours. The kids will be asleep most of the time. It's really important. We need you." That phrase, "we need you," it wasn't about needing me, Alicia. It was about needing a warm body to solve their problem, preferably for free and with no complaint. Sarah, I can't, I said, firmer this time, the words feeling strange and heavy on my tongue. I'm genuinely exhausted. I need to rest. A beat of stunned silence. Then, the passive aggression. Wow. Okay. So, you're just going to leave us hanging? On such short notice? When it's something really crucial. I'm sorry, Sarah, I said, but the apology felt hollow. I wasn't sorry. I was angry. Fine, she snapped, the sweetness gone. I guess some people just aren't willing to lift a finger for family. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, the silence in my apartment suddenly deafening. My heart was pounding. I had said no to Sarah. It felt revolutionary and terrifying. And her reaction, the immediate guilt-tripping, the accusation of not being family-oriented, cut deep. It confirmed what I'd suspected for a long time. My value to them was entirely conditional on my usefulness. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the conversation in my head, alongside countless others over the years. Every time I'd been asked to sacrifice my time, my energy, my money. Every time I'd been overlooked, dismissed, or subtly mocked. The comments about the car, about my simple life, echoed in my mind, linking directly to their expectation that I should be endlessly available. They believed I had nothing to lose, nothing important to do, because I didn't possess the outward markers of their kind of success. A profound sadness washed over me, followed by a cold, hard anger. Anger at them for their entitlement, but also anger at myself. Anger for enabling it for so long, for believing, even just a little, that their version of my life was accurate. I had allowed their narrative to define me. I had shrunk myself to fit into the small, convenient box they'd built for me. The next morning, the anger hadn't dissipated. It had solidified into resolve. I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep being the reliable, invisible Alicia who existed only to serve the needs of others. It was destroying me, chip by chip, insult by insult. I deserved to be seen, to be valued, to have boundaries. My therapist, whom I had started seeing a few months prior to deal with generalized anxiety I couldn't quite explain, had been gently guiding me towards this realization. She had helped me see the pattern of codependency and the way I'd been conditioned to seek validation by being helpful, even to my own detriment. She had encouraged me to practice setting small boundaries, to say no to things that drained me. Sarah's call had been the ultimate test, and I had, haltingly, passed. The weeks that followed Sarah's cold shoulder were difficult. She barely spoke to me, offering only terse, passive-aggressive texts in group chats. My mother, sensing the tension, called, not to understand my perspective, but to mediate, which in her world meant urging me to smooth things over and be the bigger person Sarah was just stressed. Alicia, she said gently. You know how she gets. It was important to her. Can't you just apologize? Apologize? For saying no to an unreasonable last-minute demand? The suggestion landed like a physical blow. No, Mom, I said, my voice trembling slightly, but clear. I'm not apologizing for being tired and needing to rest. I'm not her on-call babysitter. My mother sighed, a long-suffering sound. Well, you know, Sarah and Mark have families now. They have a lot more responsibilities than you do. It's just different. Different. That word again. Their lives were complex and demanding. Mine was simple and empty. Therefore, my time was freely available. This conversation, more than Sarah's anger, crystallized the depth of their misperception and the unfairness of their expectations. They genuinely believed I had less going on, less on my plate, simply because I wasn't married with children or chasing a high-profile career. My work, my investments, my efforts building my future, all of it was invisible to them because it didn't fit their narrow definition of a successful, busy life. It was Thanksgiving that year. The annual family gathering at my parents' house. The air was thick with unspoken tension between Sarah and me. Mark was there with his wife, who always seemed to regard me with a mixture of curiosity and polite detachment. The usual cast of aunts, uncles, and cousins milled about, making small talk and judging each other's choices. The topic of conversation inevitably turned to careers and finances. Mark was talking loudly about a recent bonus and plans for a ski trip to Aspen. Sarah was detailing the cost of her children's private school tuition and complaining about property taxes. Then, Uncle Tom, bless his predictable heart, turned to me. "So, Alicia," he boomed, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Still driving that classic Tercel? Must be racking up the miles running everyone around." A few people chuckled. My face felt hot. I felt everyone's eyes on me, that familiar mix of pity and condescension. For a split second, I considered my usual response, a weak smile, a mumbled deflection. But then I remembered the argument with Sarah, the conversation with my mother, the years of being taken for granted, the quiet strength I had built in secret. The anger, cold and hard, returned. Not a raging fury, but a steady, unwavering resolve. I took a deep breath and met Uncle Tom's gaze directly. "It is," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the forced merriment. "It's a reliable car. Gets me where I need to go." Sarah chimed in, a little too sweetly. "But darling, surely you could afford something a bit more comfortable? Something that reflects, well, something a bit more you? You work hard. You deserve it." The implication hung heavy in the air. Something that reflects you as the person we want you to be, someone successful enough to justify our demands, but not so successful that you wouldn't need us or have time for us. This was it. The moment. Years of silence, years of being the quiet, compliant one, culminated in this single breath. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice remained steady, surprisingly steady. "Actually, Sarah," I said, looking not just at her, but scanning the faces of everyone gathered, from my parents to my cousins. "I'm doing just fine." More than fine, I paused, letting the simple statement hang there. They looked confused. "The Tercel is perfect for me. It's practical, low maintenance. It allows me to put my money into things that matter more to me than car payments or appearances." Mark scoffed lightly. "Oh yeah? Like what? Saving up for a rainy day?" More chuckles. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached my eyes and didn't feel tight or forced. It felt powerful. Like real estate, Mark. "I bought my third apartment building downtown last month." The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. Forks clattered onto plates. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every single face was turned towards me, mouths slightly agape. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, her carefully constructed composure cracking. Mark's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned, almost panicked confusion. My parents looked utterly bewildered, like I had just started speaking a foreign language. 3 apartment buildings, my father finally stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I confirmed, still smiling. "The first one was the duplex I bought a few years ago. The second one I bought a year after that. And the third one closed last month. They're all fully occupied, generating good income." "Downtown?" Uncle Tom repeated, his voice flat. "Not. You mean downtown?" "Yes, Uncle Tom. Pioneer Square area, Belltown area," I confirmed, naming neighborhoods they knew were expensive, desirable, valuable. Their reactions were a complex, fascinating mix of shock, envy, and a dawning, horrified realization. The woman they had dismissed as having a simple life, the one who drove the clunker and was always available for errands, was quietly building a real estate empire under their noses. The person they saw as having no significant expenses or commitments because she didn't buy fancy cars or live in a big house was, in fact, managing multiple properties, dealing with tenants, mortgages, and renovations. Sarah recovered first, her eyes narrowing. "But how? You work. Where do you work again?" "At that office job? I'm a data analyst," I replied calmly. "And I saved aggressively, lived well below my means, and worked incredibly hard on the properties myself, especially in the beginning. While others were spending their money on things that depreciate, I was investing in assets, I didn't say, like your fancy cars and expensive vacations, but the implication hung in the air. Mark, the smart one, the promising one, seemed the most visibly rattled. He had always been the financial kid of the family, dispensing advice he assumed I was too simple to understand. The idea that I had not only understood, but acted on sound financial principles, achieving a level of asset ownership that likely dwarfed his own, was clearly a blow to his ego. But that's a huge amount of capital, Alicia. How did you even get the financing? He spluttered. Hard work, a solid financial history, and demonstrating profitability on the existing properties, I explained, using the kind of business jargon I knew he respected, letting him see that I wasn't just lucky, I was competent. It wasn't easy, but I did my research, I learned the market, and I was disciplined. My mother looked utterly lost, her narrative of my simple life shattered. My father just stared, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Was it pride? Regret? The rest of Thanksgiving dinner was surreal. The conversation was stilted. The casual mockery of my car and my life evaporated, replaced by an awkward deference or thinly veiled resentment. They asked questions, but they felt less like genuine interest and more like attempts to gauge the full extent of my hidden success, to understand how I had managed to break free from the box they had put me in. I didn't elaborate more than I had to. I didn't brag or lord my success over them. I simply stated the facts, calmly and unequivocally. The point wasn't to make them feel small, but to finally make myself visible. To show them that the quiet, practical Alicia they dismissed wasn't less than them. She had simply been building a different kind of life, a life of quiet strength and significant substance, while they were focused on the surface. The aftermath of that Thanksgiving reveal was messy and painful, as transformations often are. The immediate shock wore off, replaced by various forms of backlash. Sarah, after recovering from her initial speechlessness, grew cold and distant, occasionally making passive-aggressive comments about people who think they're better than everyone else now. Mark, for a while, tried to pivot, attempting to talk business with me, offering unsolicited advice on property management, clearly trying to regain his footing as the family's financial guru. It was transparent and, frankly, annoying. My mother struggled the most. She seemed genuinely hurt, not by anything I had done, but by the fact that I had kept such a huge part of my life's secret from her. "Why didn't you tell us, Alicia?" she'd ask, her voice laced with reproach. "Why did you hide this?" Because I finally told her, gently but firmly. Every time I tried to share something about my life that didn't fit the picture you had of me, you dismissed it. You weren't interested in my work, you weren't interested in my plans. You only seemed interested in my life when you needed something. And when I mentioned the first property, Mark scoffed and Sarah laughed. Why would I share something so important to me with people who treated my efforts with contempt? She didn't have an answer. She retreated into a wounded silence, unable or unwilling to acknowledge her role in creating the dynamic that had forced me underground. My father, surprisingly, was the one who seemed to shift the most. He started calling me, not with requests, but just to talk. He asked about the properties, about my tenants, about the challenges of being a landlord. He seemed genuinely curious, perhaps finally seeing me as a capable adult with a complex, interesting life, rather than just his quiet middle daughter. I knew, intellectually, that I hadn't kept my success a secret from them. I had kept it a secret for myself. It was my safe space, my private validation, the proof that I was capable and worthy, regardless of their opinions. It was protection against their judgment and their demands. Setting boundaries became the next phase. It wasn't enough to reveal my success. I had to change the fundamental dynamics of our relationships. This was harder than the reveal itself. It required constant vigilance and a willingness to tolerate their discomfort and even anger. "Alicia, could you lend me $500? Just until my bonus comes in," Mark asked one day, testing the waters. In the past, I would have hesitated, maybe offered a smaller amount, felt guilty if I said no. "No, Mark, I can't," I said immediately. "What? Why not? You own buildings downtown. You're loaded." His voice rose in indignation. "My money is tied up in investments and property management," I explained calmly. "And even if it wasn't, lending family money like that isn't good for our relationship. There are plenty of other ways you can access funds if you need them." "So, that's it then?" You're just going to turn your back on your family now that you've made it. The classic guilt trip. Setting healthy boundaries isn't turning my back on you, Mark, I said, remembering phrases from my therapy sessions. It's protecting myself and our relationship from resentment. I'm happy to help in ways that are appropriate, but I'm not a bank, he grumbled and hung up, but he stopped asking for money. Sarah continued with her passive aggression. When I declined an invitation to a family brunch she was hosting because I had scheduled maintenance at one of the buildings, she posted photos on social media tagged family who chooses to show up, clearly aimed at me. It stung, but it didn't break me. I messaged her privately. Sarah, I wrote. I saw your post. I understand you were disappointed I couldn't make it, but I had a prior commitment for my business, which is important to me. Guilt-tripping me on social media isn't fair or kind. If you're upset, please talk to me directly. Her reply was defensive and deflective, but I had made my point. I wasn't going to play her games anymore. I wasn't going to let her define my commitment to the family by how available I was to meet her demands. Slowly, painstakingly, the dynamic began to shift. My family, or at least some of them, started to treat me with more respect. They still didn't fully understand me, and there were still moments of awkwardness or attempts to revert to old patterns, but the blatant dismissal and exploitation lessened. They saw that I wasn't going to be the invisible doormat anymore. I had found my voice, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The old Toyota Tercel? I still drove it for a while. It became a symbol of my journey, a reminder of where I came from and how I got to where I was. It represented practicality, discipline, and the quiet rebellion against needing external validation. Eventually, I did buy a newer car, a comfortable, reliable sedan that wasn't flashy but felt like a well-earned upgrade. But I kept the Tercel for a few months longer, parked it in the driveway when I visited my parents, just as a quiet reminder. My life today is different. It's fuller, more complex, and entirely my own. I still work as a data analyst, a job I genuinely enjoy, but my real estate business has grown significantly. I've hired a property manager for 2 of the buildings, freeing up more of my time. I travel when I want to, invest wisely, and live comfortably. The relationships with my family are different. Some are better. My father and I have a genuine connection now. Some are more distant. Sarah and I have a polite, superficial relationship, but the deep connection we once had is gone, possibly irrevocably. Mark is cautiously respectful, perhaps seeing me now as a peer in the world of assets and investments. My mother and I are still navigating things. She's learning to see me as an independent adult, not just a supporting character in her family drama. There's a quiet peace that has settled over me. The constant anxiety of trying to measure up, of trying to be seen and valued by people who were determined to keep me small, is gone. It was replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth, built not on external validation or material possessions meant to impress others, but on hard work, resilience, and integrity. The cost of my silence and people-pleasing was immense. It cost me years of being unseen, years of sacrificing my own needs, years of internalizing their dismissive narrative. It cost me emotional energy and peace of mind. But breaking free, while painful, was worth it. It gave me back myself. I learned that true worth isn't measured by the car you drive or the house you live in. It's measured by your character, your resilience, and your willingness to honor yourself, even when the people closest to you don't understand or approve. I also learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is quietly build your own world, one where you are valued and respected, and invite only those who see your true worth to enter it. The Tercel was just a car, but it represented a whole chapter of my life where I was underestimated. Revealing what was behind it wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally proving to myself that I was enough, exactly as I was, quiet exterior and all. So, that's my story. It's a story about driving an old car and building something much bigger in the shadows. It's a story about family and how sometimes the people who are supposed to be your foundation are the ones who try to keep you from building anything for yourself. But it's also a story about finding your own strength, setting your own boundaries, and deciding for yourself what your worth is. I used to think my value was tied to how useful I was, how much I could do for others, how little trouble I caused. I spent years trying to earn love and acceptance by being the quiet, compliant one. But that's not love, is it? Love doesn't demand you disappear. Love doesn't ask you to shrink yourself. Love sees you, truly sees you, and cherishes you for who you are, not for what you can provide. The hardest part of setting boundaries wasn't their reaction, though that was difficult. The hardest part was my own internal resistance. The guilt, the fear of rejection, the ingrained habit of putting everyone else's needs first. It was like fighting against years of programming. But every small step, every time I said no, every time I spoke my truth, no matter how quietly, I felt a little stronger, a little more real. My life isn't perfect now. There are still moments of sadness, moments when I miss the easy familiarity of the way things used to be, even if that familiarity was built on unequal footing. But I don't miss the feeling of being invisible. I don't miss the weight of unspoken resentment. I look at my life now, at the properties I own, at the financial security I've built, at the space I've created for myself, and I know it was all worth it. Every long hour, every sacrificed weekend, every dollar saved, every awkward conversation. It was all part of building this new foundation, one made of solid brick and concrete, not fragile expectations and unfulfilled needs. My journey from the quiet, overlooked Alicia in the old Tercel to the confident woman managing multiple properties wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming my identity from the narrative others had written for me. It was about finding my voice and using it, even when it shakes. If you're in a similar situation, feeling unseen, feeling taken advantage of by people you love, know that you're not alone. It's incredibly difficult, and it's okay to feel hurt, angry, and confused. Your feelings are valid. You don't owe anyone your time, your energy, or your resources simply because you share a last name or history. Your worth is inherent, not conditional on your usefulness to others. Setting boundaries is a radical act of self-love. It's not selfish, it's necessary. It teaches others how to treat you, and it teaches you that you deserve to be treated with respect. It might change your relationships, and some relationships might not survive the shift, and that is okay. It might be painful, but sometimes, letting go of relationships that drain you is necessary to create space for relationships that nourish you, or simply to create space for peace within yourself. Building a life that is truly yours on your own terms is the most empowering thing you can do. Whether it's building a financial future, pursuing a passion, or simply learning to say no without guilt, every step towards honoring yourself is a step towards freedom. Don't let anyone else define your success, your happiness, or your worth. That power belongs only to you. So, that's my story. It's still unfolding, of course. Life always is. But the fundamental shift has happened. I know who I am, I know what I'm capable of, and I'm no longer waiting for anyone else to give me permission to be seen. I'm standing in my own light, driving my own journey, and building my own future, one day at a time. And if you're still watching, thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope maybe my story resonates with you, or gives you a little bit of hope or courage. If it did, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more stories like this. Let me know in the comments what part of my story resonated with you the most. Have you ever felt underestimated or had to set boundaries with family? I'd love to hear from you. Remember, you are strong, you are capable, and you are worthy of a life that is truly your own.